Welcome to the Flight Levels. Flying offers an incredible sense of freedom. A freedom that comes with a crucial responsibility, that of the pilot in command. We are the final authority for the safety of our flight. Today, we're going to examine a fatal accident from 2011 involving a pilot who's receiving air traffic services from one of my former trainers. This is a sensitive topic for me, so let's approach it with careful consideration. Real quick, if you're enjoying this content, please click the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube share my channel. With that out of the way, on the afternoon of December 3rd, 2011, a pilot and 3 passengers met at the Animas Air Park Airport in Durango, Colorado for a flight to Aspen. The pilot's wife and the other 2 passengers were employees of a bank heading to a holiday party in Snowmass that evening. For many, flying to a party in Aspen sounds like the perfect way to travel. The pilot was a 59-year-old male holding a private pilot certificate for airplane single-engine land. He had approximately 600 hours of total flight time, with 200 hours in the make and model of aircraft. Crucially, he did not possess an instrument rating. The aircraft was a Cicada TB-21, a low-wing, 4-place airplane with retractable gear, powered by a 250 horsepower, turbocharged, fuel-injected, Lycoming TIO 540 engine with a constant speed propeller. This type of aircraft is certainly capable of safely navigating the mountains of Colorado in good weather. Unfortunately, that Saturday, the weather was far from good. Airmets issued prior to the flight's departure and valid through the planned time en route advised of moderate turbulence, moderate icing, instrument flight rules conditions with precipitation and mist and mountain obscuration. It remains unknown how thoroughly the pilot reviewed the weather before departing. After departing the Durango area, the pilot presumably encountered clouds and began a climb, likely attempting to maintain VFR conditions above them. Approximately 30 miles into the flight, the pilot contacted Denver Air Route Traffic Control Center for VFR flight following. At this point, the pilot had climbed to flight level 200, or 20,000 feet. Now, you might already be asking, how could this pilot be at flight level 200 without an IFR clearance? That's an excellent question. Right away, it's fair to say this pilot made some questionable decisions. His initial choice to depart, potentially without a thorough weather briefing, stands out. It's difficult to reconcile the idea of a pilot presumably familiar with Southwest Colorado willingly taking off into conditions forecast to be riddled with icing and turbulence. Perhaps, giving him the benefit of the doubt, he underestimated the severity of the weather. So, let's assume he departed without full knowledge of the weather. As he proceeded en route, he clearly observed the clouds and their increasing height. He made a reasonably sound decision to climb above the clouds and the icing. His aircraft had the performance to do so. However, as many of you are aware, there's a critical detail. Class A airspace begins at flight level 180. To enter Class A airspace, an IFR flight plan and an IFR clearance are mandatory. So while climbing above the clouds offered a temporary solution, it had its limits. As he climbed through 16 or 17,000 feet, the pilot should have been anticipating the airspace restriction and possibly considering reversing course back to Durango. But the holiday party. Let's consider the FAA's Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, specifically Chapter 2 on Aeronautical Decision Making. The PAVE checklist is a useful tool for perceiving hazards, and in this case, we have the E for external factors. The handbook explains external factors are influences external to the flight that create a sense of pressure to complete a flight, often at the expense of safety. These include a passenger the pilot does not want to disappoint, the desire to demonstrate pilot qualifications, the desire to impress someone, the desire to satisfy a specific personal goal, we know this as get-there-itis, emotional pressure associated with acknowledging that skill and experience levels may be lower than a pilot would like them to be. Instead of turning around, the pilot chose to continue toward Aspen. As the clouds continued to rise, he also continued climbing, all the way to flight level 200. At this point, the pilot called Denver Center for VFR flight following. I was on vacation that weekend, but when I returned to work the following week, I learned that the controller who spoke to this pilot was my trainer. Well, 13 years have passed and I don't recall his exact words. I distinctly remember my trainer's surprise when the pilot confirmed he was indeed VFR at flight level 200. My trainer then recounted the sequence of events to me. He made a point to remind the pilot that to fly VFR, he needed to be below flight level 180. The pilot responded that he would descend below the flight levels as soon as he could. My trainer then asked if the pilot could maintain VFR below his current altitude, to which the pilot replied he could not. My trainer followed up by asking if the pilot was capable of IFR flight, to which the pilot responded, "I'm capable, I'm studying it at this time, but if you could help me head on over, I'd sure appreciate it." Recognizing the ambiguity in this answer, my trainer asked, "Are you capable and qualified for IFR flight?" The pilot replied, "I'm not qualified." That was the last transmission from the pilot. According to the NTSB report, the aircraft wreckage was consistent with an in-flight breakup. The pilot descended into the clouds, fell victim to vertigo and spatial disorientation. The structural limits of the aircraft were exceeded, leading to its catastrophic failure. The plane's debris covered a 1.5 mile wide swath of mountainside. Let's dissect the pilot's decisions. We've already discussed his choice to depart in those conditions, but let's focus on his situation when he contacted Denver Center. Although he was in violation of FAR Part 91 by entering Class A airspace without a clearance, he may have been physically safe above the weather at flight level 200. I believe he and his passengers still had a chance to survive at this point. What he should have done was utilize his authority as pilot in command as outlined in FAR 91.3. When calling Denver Center, he should have declared an emergency. My impression, and perhaps a common one, is that pilots are sometimes hesitant to declare an emergency, fearing reprimand from air traffic controllers or the FAA. This pilot likely thought, "Oh snap, I just admitted I entered Class A airspace without a clearance, I'm going to get busted." In that moment, I believe the pilot perceived descending through the clouds as a better option than being reprimanded by my trainer. My trainer asked not once, but twice if he could descend below flight level 180. I can absolutely empathize with the pilot's urgency to descend to appease the air traffic controller. But appeasing the controller killed him. Had he declared an emergency, there's a significant chance he could have remained above the weather and been vectored to an area where the weather was clear enough for a safe VFR descent. There was no physical danger in being at flight level 200. The danger lay in descending into the clouds without proper training or visibility. Now, let's consider the air traffic controller, my trainer. I had so many feelings when he shared his account of the event, but as his trainee, I chose to remain silent. It wasn't my place to critique him then. On one hand, he followed every procedure by the book. His phraseology was spot on with how air traffic controllers are trained. And unequivocally, the pilot made some very poor decisions that were not the controller's fault. At the same time, I'm going to assert that controllers collectively need to do better. I feel controllers sometimes assume pilots in distress are simply doofuses or negligent. You've probably heard the audio recordings. "Hey, what are you doing over there?" Or controllers pointing out a pilot's regulatory or airspace violation. Instead, controllers should strive to assume the pilot is in a difficult situation because they are experiencing a problem. A more empathetic and effective response might be, "I see you are having a problem. How can I help?" This event has profoundly impacted me because while the air traffic controller acted entirely by the book, I feel very strongly that the outcome of adhering strictly to procedure led the pilot to make a fatal error. I believe the controller could have been more empathetic to the pilot's predicament and perhaps guided him toward a safer decision. What do you think? Tell me in the comments if you believe the pilot and his passengers could have survived had the controller adopted a more empathetic approach. Or do you feel this incident is 100% on the pilot and the controller was correct to stick to the established procedure? Today, we examined a tragic crash in the mountains of southwest Colorado. The pilot of this flight made several critical misjudgments. He also had an opportunity to use his authority as pilot in command to potentially save himself and his passengers. Unfortunately, his hazardous attitudes, perhaps coupled with pressure and misunderstanding, led him to descend into clouds where he lost control of his airplane. Thank you for watching. Head over to flight-levels.com. Remember, don't just fly, climb to the flight levels. If you enjoyed this video, click here to see how visual approaches work. You're gonna love it.